The wind howled outside, cold and angry. Snow covered the land like a thick white blanket. Inside an old wooden house, a man named Reed sat alone. He held a cup of hot tea in his hands, the steam warming his face. The fire crackled softly in the fireplace. It was a quiet night, just like every night for the past many years. Reed was a human living alone on a faraway planet long ago. He had left the busy cities and the loud space stations. He had come here to forget the past, to forget the war, to forget the family he lost. He just wanted peace. But that peace came with silence, and silence often came with pain. Suddenly, a soft knock broke the silence. Knock, knock. Reed looked up, surprised. No one ever came here. He lived far from the main roads, and it was freezing outside. He waited, thinking maybe it was the wind. But the knock came again, louder. He stood up, took his old coat from the wall, and walked to the door. Slowly, he opened it. His eyes widened. Standing outside was an alien woman, her body shaking in the cold. Her skin was a soft blue color, her hair long and wet with snow. Behind her, hiding under her cloak, was a small girl, maybe 5 years old. She looked thin, scared, and very cold. The woman looked at Reed with tired eyes and said something he didn't expect. "Just one night with me. Feed my daughter." Her voice was soft but firm, like she had made this offer before. Reed stared at her, confused. Was she really offering herself just for food? He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he looked at the little girl. Her lips were blue. Her eyes half closed. Reed stepped aside and said, "Come in." The woman hesitated, but then nodded. She entered the house slowly, holding the child close. Reed closed the door behind them, keeping the cold out. The woman looked around carefully. Reed pointed to the warm fire. "Sit there," he said. She moved to the fire and helped the girl sit down. The little one held out her tiny hands to the heat. Her fingers were red from the cold. Reed quickly went to the kitchen. He found some soup he had made earlier and heated it. Then he gave a bowl to the girl and one to the woman. The girl ate slowly at first, then faster, like she hadn't eaten in days. The woman only took small bites, her eyes watching Reed the whole time. When they finished, Reed gave them some blankets. "You can sleep here," he said, pointing to the small couch. The woman lowered her eyes. "You don't want anything in return?" she asked. Reed shook his head. "You and your daughter needed help." "That's enough," the woman didn't answer. But she looked at him differently now, not with fear but with surprise. She whispered something in her own language and hugged her daughter close. That night, Reed sat by the window holding his tea again. He listened to the fire and watched the snow fall outside. He thought about the woman's offer. What had she gone through to say those words so easily? What kind of life had she lived? The night was silent again, but Reed did not feel calm. He stood by the window watching the snow fall. His hand rested on the old plasma rifle hanging near the door. He had seen the footprints outside, 3 sets too big to be from the woman or her child. Someone had been close, watching them from the dark. Reed waited until morning, sitting near the fire. He did not sleep. The woman and her daughter were curled under blankets, warm and safe, but Reed's mind was racing. At sunrise, the little girl woke up first. She rubbed her eyes and looked around the room. Then she saw Reed and gave him a small smile, a real, soft smile that warmed his chest more than the fire ever could. He smiled back. "Good morning, little one," he said gently. The woman woke next, alert and cautious. She quickly looked for her daughter. Then for Reed, she seemed ready to run even now. Reed raised a hand slowly. "It's okay. No one's coming in." He walked to the small kitchen and made breakfast. Some warm bread, dried fruit, and tea. He placed it on the table without saying much. The girl ate happily again, her hunger still strong. The woman took the food slowly, almost like she was checking if it was safe. After a few bites, she finally spoke. "You should not have helped us." Reed looked at her, surprised. "Why?" he asked. She paused, then said, "Because now, you are in danger too." Reed leaned back in his chair. "I've lived with danger before," he said. "War took my family, my home, my peace. Since then, I've had nothing left to lose." The woman looked down at the table, quiet for a moment, then she whispered, "My name is Kayla." She pointed to the little girl. "This is Minu, my daughter." Reed nodded. "Nice to meet you both." "I'm Reed." Kayla looked at him again, this time with softer eyes. Still full of pain, but less fear. Later that morning, while Minu played with a wooden toy Reed had made long ago, Kayla finally told her story. They had been slaves on a transport ship run by black market traders. They were taken from their homeworld years ago. Minu was born inside the dark ship, raised in cages. Kayla had tried to escape before but failed this time. She got lucky. The ship crashed during a storm, and she ran. They are searching, Kayla said. They have a tracker on me. I was burned into my back. She turned around and lifted her shirt slightly. There, glowing faintly, was a red mark, like a brand. It blinked slowly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Reed stepped closer to examine it. This is a signal, he said. They can trace you with this, Kayla nodded, her voice low. They always find us. Reed walked to a shelf and pulled down an old device and a signal scanner. He turned it on and it buzzed weakly. Yes, the mark was still sending out a location. We have to remove it, Reed said. But it's risky. Kayla did not hesitate. Do it, she said. I'd rather take the pain than see them take Minu again. Reed set up his old medical kit. It wasn't made for alien skin, but it would have to do. He numbed the area and used a small tool to carefully cut around the tracker. Kayla gritted her teeth but did not scream. Blood ran down her back slowly, dark and thick. Reed finally pulled the tracker out and dropped it into a metal jar, sealing it. We'll throw this far away later, he said. For now, we hide it. Kayla fell weak after the pain. Reed helped her lie down, then covered her with a blanket. Minu sat beside her mother, holding her hand. Silent and brave, but outside, the world was not quiet. Far across the snowy hills, a small black drone buzzed through the sky. Its red eye blinked as it scanned the land. And far behind it, hidden among the trees, were three dark figures heavily armed, faces covered with masks. One of them held up a communicator. Signal is weak, he said. But she's close. They moved forward. Slow and steady, the hunt had begun again. Back inside the house, Reed cleaned the blood from his hands. He looked out the window again. Something in the air felt wrong. A tension like the calm before a storm. He knew the footprints from last night were not a dream. Someone had already found their trail, and they were coming to where that was her only choice. He looked at the small girl sleeping with her face buried in the blanket. He remembered his own daughter, the one he lost during the war. She used to sleep like that too. Tears formed in his eyes, but he wiped them away quickly. Suddenly he heard something, a soft whisper outside the window. He stood up and went to the door, opening it slightly. He looked into the night. Nothing, but then he saw it. Footprints in the snow. They were not human, not like his boots, not like the woman's either. These were larger, and there were 3 sets. Someone, or something, had been watching them. Reed closed the door slowly and locked it. He looked back at the woman and her child. Both now asleep, he knew one thing for sure. This was not just a simple night. Trouble was coming. And it had already found their door. The snow stopped falling, but the sky was still gray. Reed stood on the porch of his old wooden house. He looked at the distant hills with tired eyes. He knew what was out there, hunters inside. Kayla slept with Minu curled beside her. The wound on her back was bandaged. Her skin was cold and pale, but her breathing was calm. She had survived the removal of the tracker, but the real danger was still coming. Reed walked back inside and closed the door tight. He opened a trapdoor under the rug and climbed down into the dark. The air smelled of rust and old metal. This was a room no one had entered in years. It was built during the last war, back when humans feared alien attacks. Now it would be their hiding place. The underground room had walls made of steel and stone. There were crates of old supplies, blankets, batteries, even food. But more importantly, there were weapons. Reed wiped dust off a case and opened it. Inside lay a pulse rifle, a few grenades, and 1 EMP charge. He touched the rifle slowly. His hand shook a little. He had promised himself he would never hold one again. Not after what happened to his wife and child during the war. Back then he was a soldier. He fought hard, obeyed orders. But one mission had gone wrong. His base was bombed while he was away. By the time he returned, everything was ash. He found a small shoe in the rubble, his daughter's. Since that day, he left everything behind. He came to this cold, empty world to forget, but now, he could not stay hidden anymore, because Kayla and Minu reminded him what it felt like to care again. To protect. Back upstairs, Kayla had woken up. She sat quietly, watching Minu draw circles on the foggy window with her little finger. Reed brought her some tea. She nodded in thanks, her voice too weak to speak. After a few minutes, she finally said, You have a war room underground. Reed didn't deny it. Yes, he said, built a long time ago. Before I gave up fighting. Kayla looked into his eyes. But you haven't given up, she said. Not really. Reed didn't answer. He stared into the fire. Kayla sat closer. Her voice lower now. When the ship crashed, I thought I'd die. But when I looked at Minu, I knew I had to live. Even if I had to beg or bargain, Reed turned to her. That night, he said, what made you say those words? Kayla looked down, ashamed, because that's how the galaxy sees us. Worth nothing unless we offer something in return. But you gave us warmth without a price. Reed's jaw tightened. That's not kindness, he said. That's what everyone should do. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The scanner on the wall beeped softly. Reed stood up and walked over. He checked the screen where a ship had entered the atmosphere. Small, fast, private, not from the patrol fleet. It was them. He looked back at Kayla. They're near, he said. Kyla stood up too, holding Minu close. We'll run, she said. We always run, but Reed shook his head. Not this time. He led them to the trapdoor and helped them climb down into the hidden room. Minu looked around with wide eyes. Kayla whispered, This place, it's safe. Reed handed her a small device. If anything happens to me, press this button. It will send a signal to the nearest patrol base. Don't come out until I say. Kayla grabbed his hand suddenly. Her eyes full of fear. You'll die if you face them alone. Reed gave a small smile. I've already died once, he said softly. This time, I have something to live for. He climbed back up and shut the trapdoor, covering it with the rug. He picked up the rifle, checked the charge, and placed the EMP near the door. Then he sat in silence, waiting. Outside, the sound of engines grew louder. A shadow moved over the snow. Their ship had landed. 3 dark figures stepped out, masked and armed. They scanned the area with glowing red lenses. One of them spoke into a communicator. We're close, he said. Signal is gone. But heat traces are fresh. They moved toward the house. Slowly, like wolves in the snow inside, Reed watched their shadows from the window. He knew this house might burn. He knew he might not make it. But one thing was clear. He would not let them take Kayla or Minu. Not now, not ever. The wind had quieted outside, but the air was full of danger. Reed stood still behind the window curtain, holding his rifle tight. He could see them now. 3 masked figures moving slowly through the snow. Their black suits made no sound, their red eye lenses scanning for heat. For life, for prey, inside the house. Everything was silent. Kayla and Minu were hidden below. In the underground war room, the rug was smooth again. The fire was low. Reed had turned off the heaters to hide body warmth. But he knew it wouldn't take long before the hunters noticed. The lead bounty hunter stopped near the porch. He touched the side of his helmet and said, Main signal gone, but thermal traces inside, at least one life form. The second one raised his weapon. Standard breach? No, the leader replied. We talk first, then burn it, Reed's jaw clenched. They would destroy his home without care, just to collect one mother and child. He felt anger rise in his chest, not the loud kind, but the cold kind, the kind that made men calm before battle. A hard knock hit the door. Bang, bang, bang. Anyone inside? Came a robotic voice. Reed didn't answer. Another knock, louder. Then a voice said, You are harboring fugitives. They are illegal property. Turn them in and you will not be harmed. Reed opened the door slowly. Just a crack, he stared at the 3 masked faces. I live alone, he said, voice calm. Just an old man with a cold farm. One of them stepped forward. We traced the signal to this area. You saw someone pass through? Reed gave a lazy smile. Only snow and silence, he said. But you're welcome to look around. The bounty hunter nodded. They entered the house, 2 staying close. One walking toward the barn. Reed's heart raced, but his face showed nothing. He limped slightly as he walked, pretending to be weak. He let them search the kitchen, the hallway, even under the bed, but not the living room rug. The one outside returned, shaking his head. Nothing. The leader frowned. Signal doesn't lie. He turned to Reed. Old man, if we find out you're lying? Reed interrupted with a fake laugh. I lie about my age sometimes, but not much else. Now, unless you want tea, I'd like to rest. They stared at him for a moment longer. Then slowly the 3 turned and walked out. Reed watched them through the window. They didn't leave. They set up a small camp down the ridge. Just out of view, waiting, watching inside, Reed let out a slow breath. He moved the rug and opened the trapdoor. Kayla climbed up, holding Minu in her arms. "They're still here?" she whispered. Reed nodded. "They'll wait for night." Kyla placed Minu on the couch. The little girl looked up at Reed with wide eyes. "Are we going to run again?" she asked softly. Reed knelt beside her, brushing her hair back gently. "No," he said. "Not this time." Kayla sat down beside them, her voice shaking. "I've always run." "Reed, every time they got close I ran. Even when I was pregnant with her. Even when I had to crawl through sewer tunnels. I ran because no one ever stood between me and them." Reed looked into her eyes. "You don't have to run anymore," he said. "Let's fight." She blinked, surprised, then slowly she nodded. "Tell me what to do." That night, Reed and Kayla worked in silence. They planted hidden explosives near the ridge, rigged the barn with smoke bombs. Reed showed her how to handle a blaster. Her hands shook at first, but she learned fast. Back in the house, Minu sat by the fire, drawing a picture with a broken pencil. It was a house, with 3 stick figures holding hands. Reed paused when he saw it. His eyes stung. He placed a gentle kiss on her head before sleeping. He wrote a note and placed it inside a sealed tin. It said, "If I don't make it, protect them." Then, just before sunrise, a red flash lit the horizon. The attack had begun. Blaster shots hit the barn first. It exploded with fire and smoke. Reed waited by the door, Kayla beside him, weapon ready. They weren't soldiers, not anymore. They were a family protecting their last chance at peace, and this time they would not back down. The early light of dawn crept through the cracks in the window. Smoke still rose from the barn, now just a black skeleton. The snow around it was melted and dirty. Reed stood quietly in the front room, his rifle in one hand, his breath steady. Kayla sat near the wall, reloading a blaster with shaking fingers. She had never used a weapon before. Not like this, but she had made her choice. She would not run again. Minu sat in the corner, holding a blanket to her chest. Her big eyes watched the adults without blinking. She didn't cry. She was used to danger, far too used to it for someone so small. Reed walked to a shelf near the fireplace and pulled down an old metal box. He opened it slowly, like lifting a memory. Inside were medals, pictures, and one folded piece of cloth, his old military patch. He hadn't looked at these in years. Didn't think he ever would again. He showed it to Kayla. "I was a soldier once," he said quietly. "Good at killing, bad at surviving." Kayla looked at the patch, then at Reed. "Why did you stop?" she asked. Reed gave a tired smile. "Because the war took more from me than the enemy ever could. My wife, my daughter, gone in one blast. After that, I put down the gun and picked up a shovel. This farm was supposed to be my peace." Kayla touched his arm, her voice gentle. "And now it's your battlefield again." Reed nodded. "But this time, I'm not fighting for orders, I'm fighting for people." They began preparing the land. Reed knew every corner of the property, every weak spot. Every blind turn, they placed smoke bombs in the tree line, set up tripwires near the water tank. Reed even buried small charges under the snow path leading to the front door. Kayla helped him carry the old solar battery to the roof. From there, Reed connected an old EMP launcher. It was risky. It would only fire once, and then it would fry his own power too. But if the enemy brought drones again, it might give them a chance. Back inside, Minu helped in her own way. She filled water bottles, laid out food, and even folded the blankets every time Reed passed her. She gave him a small smile, and every time he saw her, something soft grew in his chest. That evening, after all traps were set, they sat around the low fire. The house was dark, lights off to avoid giving away their position. Only the soft glow of flames lit their faces. Reed handed Kayla a small piece of dried meat. She took it but didn't eat. Her eyes were far away. "Do you think we'll survive?" she asked. Reed looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I know I'm not afraid to die anymore. What I fear is letting them take you and Minu." Kayla didn't answer. Instead, she moved closer and leaned her head on his shoulder. Reed froze for a second, then relaxed. It had been years since anyone touched him like that. Minu climbed into his lap without asking. She was warm and light. Her head rested against his chest. Reed wrapped his arms around her gently. Family. It was a word he had buried. But now in this tiny moment it came back to life. Later, Reed stood by the window again. The stars above were clear, sharp, and in the distance, across the frozen ridge, he saw it, a small red blinking light. They were still there, still waiting, still hunting. Reed checked his weapon, then walked outside. He moved silently along the edge of the field until he reached an old post. From there he placed a camera eye, an old war tool. Still working, now he could see them better, track their movements. He returned to the house and sat down. Kayla looked at him. Did they move? Reed shook his head. Not yet. But they will. They always do when the sky turns red. Kayla nodded. Then we'll be ready. That night Reed didn't sleep. He sat with his back against the door. Rifle across his lap, Kayla lay near Minu, one hand resting on her daughter's chest. The fire burned low, almost out, but the heat between them, the trust, the quiet bond, that burned stronger than ever. Tomorrow would not be easy. Tomorrow might be their last day. But Reed had made peace with that, because he finally had something worth dying for, and more than that, he had something worth living for again. The sky turned red as the sun began to rise. It wasn't just the light of morning. It was the glow of engines from the bounty hunter's ship powering up. The storm had passed, the snow had hardened, and the war was about to begin. Reed stood at the window, rifle ready. His breath fogged the glass. He could see them now, the three hunters moving like shadows across the ridge. One held a drone launcher, another had a heat scanner. The leader walked in front, tall and silent. They were coming, and this time, they wouldn't knock. Kayla joined Reed at the door, dressed in one of his old jackets, blaster in hand. She wasn't a soldier, not yet. But her eyes were steady. Her fear had become fire. Minu is safe, she said. They had hidden the child in the underground room again. This time with earplugs, food, and a drawing Reed gave her. A little house with a son. Reed looked at Kayla. Are you ready? She gave a small nod. I won't let them take her. The first shot came like thunder. A pulse beam hit the side of the house, sending wood flying. Reed and Kayla ducked behind cover. Reed hit a switch. Smoke bombs fired into the trees, covering the land in white mist. The bounty hunters spread out, moving fast. But Reed had planned for that. One of them stepped on a tripwire. Boom. A small blast knocked him off his feet. His scanner shorted out. The other two kept moving, firing blindly into the smoke inside. Reed watched their heat signatures through an old monitor. Now, he whispered. He kicked open the side door and fired. 2 sharp shots, one hit a drone. Sending it spinning into the snow, Kayla followed. Moving to the opposite side of the house, she took cover behind a broken water tank and fired her blaster. For a moment, it felt like they were winning. But then the leader sent a shockwave bomb. It hit the ground and pushed the smoke away. Now the field was clear again. They're adapting, Reed said through his earpiece. Kayla answered. So will we. The leader aimed at the house and began walking forward. Reed threw a grenade near his feet. It exploded, but the man kept walking. His armor was heavy, old military grade. Too strong for normal weapons, Reed turned toward the roof, the EMP. He ran inside and climbed to the top of the house. The snow was slippery, the wind cold, but he kept going. He reached the launcher and aimed at the leader's armor. Kayla fired from below to keep him distracted. The moment was right, bizzed. The EMP fired with a loud crack. A burst of light shot through the air. It hit the leader full in the chest. His armor sparked and smoked. Then powered down, he fell to one knee, stuck, frozen for now. But the third hunter was still moving. He threw a flash bomb at Kayla. She turned too late. The light hit her eyes and she fell. Covering her face, the hunter rushed toward her, gun ready. Reed jumped down from the roof. Pain shot through his leg, but he didn't stop. He grabbed a metal pipe and swung it hard. Clang! It hit the hunter in the head, breaking part of his helmet. The man turned and punched Reed in the stomach. Reed fell, gasping. The hunter raised his gun. But Kayla was back on her feet, her vision still blurry. She fired blindly, a one shot. It hit the hunter in the side. He turned, angry. Reed grabbed his rifle and shot again, once, twice. This time the hunter dropped. The field went silent. Snowflakes began to fall again. Gently, as if nothing had happened. Kayla ran to Reed and helped him sit up. You okay? Reed nodded, coughing. I felt worse, he joked. Kayla laughed, just a little, through tears. They walked back toward the house. The leader was still frozen by the EMP, but they knew it wouldn't last. Inside, they opened the trapdoor. Minu looked up scared, but when she saw them alive, she smiled and jumped into Reed's arms. "You're back," she whispered. Reed held her close, always, suddenly. A low sound filled the sky. A different kind of engine, not the bounty hunters. Reed stepped outside and looked up. A silver patrol ship was landing just beyond the field. Help had arrived, but was it too late? The silver patrol ship touched the ground with a quiet hum. Its lights lit up the white snow, painting long shadows across the broken field. Reed stood at the doorway of his damaged house. His rifle low in his hand, Kayla and Minu stood behind him. Close but silent, for a moment no one moved. Then the side of the patrol ship opened, and 6 armored officers stepped out. Their uniforms were clean, their helmets marked with the symbol of the Galactic Peace Council. They were the real law. Not slavers, not hunters, real protectors. The officer in front removed her helmet. She was human, with sharp eyes and a steady voice. "We received a distress signal," she said. "Report says illegal bounty activity on this land." Reed nodded and pointed toward the frozen hunter leader still on his knees, armor sparking weakly. "They came to take her," he said, pointing to Kyla. "They called her property." The officer walked to the hunter and scanned his armor. Her screen lit up red. She frowned. "This suit belongs to a banned syndicate. These men are not official bounty hunters. They're criminals." Another officer collected the broken helmets from the other 2 fallen men. They scanned their faces and sent the data to the ship. "Confirmed," one of them said. "All 3 are blacklisted. Wanted across 4 systems." Reed stepped back, his knees weak with relief. Kayla let out a breath she had been holding for too long. She looked down at Minu, who was hugging Reed's leg. "Safe now, truly safe." The lead officer turned to Kayla and said, "May I scan your mark?" Kayla hesitated, then pulled back her collar, showing the faint red scar. The officer ran her scanner and waited. A few seconds later, the screen turned green. "You were tagged by a stolen device," and she said, "Not official. Not legal. You and your child are not property. You are free." Kayla's lips trembled. Her hands covered her mouth and she dropped to her knees in the snow. Tears ran down her cheeks. Reed quickly moved to her side. Placing his hand gently on her shoulder, Minu looked at her mother, confused. "Mama, why are you crying?" Kayla pulled her daughter close, whispering, "Because we're free, baby. We're really free." The officers moved to collect the remaining evidence. They cuffed the bounty leader, who said nothing. His eyes burned with hatred, but no words left his mouth. He knew it was over before the officers left. One of them asked Reed, "Would you like to press charges for the damage?" Reed shook his head. "No," he said. "Just make sure they never come back." The officer nodded and stepped onto the ship. As the engines roared back to life and the patrol ship lifted into the sky, Reed, Kayla, and Minu stood outside their broken home. The snow fell lightly again, clean and quiet, like the world was being washed new inside. The house was a mess, walls cracked, windows broken, smoke still in the air. But it was still standing just like them that night. They sat around a small fire again. Kayla made a simple meal with what they had left. Reed wrapped Minu in a thick blanket and carried her to the couch. She was already asleep, her arms around his neck. When he returned to the fire, Kayla was waiting. She reached out and took his hand. No words, just warmth, trust, something neither of them had felt in a very long time. After a long silence, Kayla finally said, "You could have let us go, Reed. You could have stayed out of it. Why didn't you?" Reed looked into the fire, thinking. Then he answered, "Because when you knocked on my door that night, I remembered what it felt like to be human again. Not just a man hiding in the cold, but someone who could protect, who could care." Kayla leaned her head on his shoulder. "We don't have a home," she whispered. "Not anymore." Reed looked at her. "You do now," he said. "This place, and it's yours too." A tear rolled down her cheek, but it was not a tear of pain. It was hope, a feeling she thought she had lost forever. Weeks passed. The house was repaired. The field slowly cleared. Kayla planted vegetables. Minu learned how to fix machines from Reed. They laughed more, slept better, dreamed again. One morning, Minu ran to the porch holding a small flower. "Papa Reed," she called. Reed looked up from the tools in his hands. Surprised, he smiled and opened his arms. She jumped into them. Kayla stood at the doorway. Watching them, her heart full, her eyes soft, no more chains, no more hiding, only light, only love, only home.